Question time. Is The War of the Simpsons one of the most old-fashioned episodes in series history? Whenever I watch this one, and we get to the General Sherman stuff, I feel like I'm watching, an old episode of The Andy Griffith Show, or Lassie or something. It just feels like classic television. A classic marriage conflict between husband and wife, culminating in a battle with a folk legend to prove himself. Hell, some of the most memorable jokes make me wanna put on a jazz record, pour me a scotch, and discuss the latest New Yorker. This whole episode is so damn retro, I can't deal with it. Thanks, John. But are these more old-fashioned elements even a bad thing? The Simpsons has always proudly displayed its sitcom roots. Does The War of the Simpsons actually bring something new to this formula, or is this just an antiquated throwback from season 2? Basically, is that winking fish really that bad? From a plot standpoint, The War of the Simpsons plays things entirely by the book. The bumbling husband does something stupid in Act 1, gets criticized in Act 2, and eventually changes his ways in Act 3. There are no major plot swerves, no experimentation, no subversive messaging in its conclusion. Just a clean and straightforward introduction of plot elements to test the characters. Structurally, it's incredibly boring. However, rewatching this recently, I think I was wrong. Sure, structurally it's the most straightforward thing ever, but execution-wise, this isn't just another sitcom-y Homer-Marge fight capped off with a symbolic fish. The foundation of the story is anything but boring, and it permeates the entire thing. What keeps The War of the Simpsons fresh is its excellent first act. What I love about the Act 1 party is just how raw it is. Homer's gonna get drunk and make a scene, but instead of chaotic rapid-fire gags, it's played for maximum awkwardness, like an episode of The Office. They do an amazing job of escalating each bit of bad behavior until it is almost unbearable. You really do feel for Marge by the end of it. First, it starts out as general boorish behavior, a hacky prank for the unamused doctor. Then, let's incoherently try to get Bart to entertain his drinking buddies. Now he's the pathetic party guy, stumbling all over himself, and then picking a fight with some guy he met a few hours ago. Every scene, you're seeing the other characters' reactions and cringing to yourself. All culminating in the Maude Peanut scene, one of the creepiest Homer moments in series history. God, he is such a scuzz during this moment. It's actually kind of beautiful how uncomfortable the visual direction is. How we start at a distance, and the camera zooms closer and closer and closer as Homer leers at her. The way his eyelids sleepily flutter about, the way he slurs his speech. Dan's performance of, "Not those peanuts," and huskily whispering, "The ones at the bottom." Whole thing is sleazy and off-putting, and it's amazing. Of course we have to indulgently zoom on Maude's capital knockers. This is a total tangent, and I'm gonna sound like such a dude saying this, but I miss this aspect of Ned and Maude's characterization. They got so flanderized that they'll do these jokes later on, the buttoned-up Maude. But I think this is more interesting, that the Flanders like to have a little fun. That Ned can pour a few drinks, and Maude wants to wear something lower cut to a party. Basically what I'm saying is, we the audience were robbed of Maude's boobs, and I blame the writers. Anyway, the fact that we're firmly established in Season 2 makes Homer's pathetic drunkenness all the more unnerving. Much like Marge, we the audience actually know these characters now. This isn't like Burns' Picnic from last season. Of course Dr. Hibbert is going to be unamused by this. We're horrified that this is happening in front of that awful gossip Helen Lovejoy. Even aside from Homer, they're showing some of that Season 2 continuity, with Barney slovenly chatting up Patty and Selma. Love the detail of his shirt tail stuck through his zipper. Very classy. They play this whole sequence much darker and more realistically, compared to Homer's later inebriated adventures. Homer getting drunk on this show is almost always played as a lark, this over-the-top cartoony embarrassment that we will all quickly forget about. Even Duffless, an episode all about his alcoholism, plays things breezy and fun. It's so weird watching this early example, where Hibbert is literally warning Marge about Homer swallowing his tongue. I described this episode as old-fashioned structurally, but find me an old sitcom where the bumbling husband reaches these depths of pathetic. They were wise to minimize Bart and Lisa's relationship with their dad, focusing the entirety of the conflict on Marge. Act 1 is already uncomfortable by the Simpsons standards. Why scar the kids while we're at it? That Bart moment might hit a little too close to home for some in the audience, suddenly seeing a loved one blathering on and demanding you perform. But thankfully, this is Bart, who has never respected Homer, and they make sure to underline it. Can you imagine if they did this plot beat with Lisa? It becomes much heavier. They do a wonderful job of showing how Homer's behavior affects the kids, but keeping it light, with funny car radio jokes and party pranks. Also, by shoving the kids aside to their B-plot, it allows them to focus in on the Homer and Marge relationship, the real thrust of the story. Speaking of that B-plot, in the past I've always found it to be pretty disposable and outdated. Like, when I think of Grandpa babysitting the kids, I think of Bart stealing his teeth and flying around on a fan. Or if Homer and Marge are out, I think of them running from the babysitter bandit or Bart going to bread. They've done this Bart and Lisa mischief subplot so many times in much more memorable circumstances. Them picking out unapproved groceries isn't exactly blowing my socks off. That being said, there are some strong jokes here. Love this Marge list, capped off with Grandpa's extra instructions. Bart yelling, "For the last time, yes!" Seeing him smoke a cigar is pretty surreal. I also appreciate this B-plot and how it breaks up the action of our main storyline. The Homer-Marge marriage retreat is extremely sedentary. The entire point of it is to sit around and hash things out. It's nice being able to hop back and forth to avoid things becoming monotonous. The B-plot provides some clever plot symmetry as well. At the beginning, Bart and Lisa are denied the chance to stay up for their parents' party. So naturally, when they're away, they throw their own house party. This is basically the kid version of overindulging and getting wasted at a party, right? That's some good theming right there. I remember the commentary pointing out this syrup thing going on in the background, and it always distracts me now. Why is Nelson dumping kids' faces in syrup? Is that kid from Bart's gifted school? Serves him right. Also, I kinda dig this design of Nelson's rough mullet hairstyle here. I remember tough kids in the 90s having hair exactly like this. We get his first haha joke here too, kinda. What a party this was. I'm not especially impressed by the resolution, with Grandpa turning the tables on them by pretending to cry. They lean into the ethical angle with Lisa throughout, asking the audience to pity Grandpa. We're supposed to cheer when he reveals he fooled them into cleaning up the whole house. But I don't know. I don't find myself caring that much, especially as the capper for the whole episode. I can't get behind Grandpa as this passive slow player. I'm much more used to him either immediately mouthing off or just not giving a shit in general. Grandpa tends to be more aggressive and choleric than this. Going back to this earlier characterization seems off. Anyway, enough of this B-plot. You know whose characterization isn't off? Marge. At first glance, Acts 2 and 3 seem like every other nagging Marge storyline or sitcom premise, where her only job is to beat up on Homer's character and be the straight man in the comedy routine. The stereotypical, boring mom character. Wash, rinse, repeat, we've seen this a lot. However, the gravity of Act 1, how raw and awkwardly they play it, keeps this dusty concept fresh. It forces Marge to be more proactive in pushing the narrative, not simply nagging Homer, but actively pushing him to do better and signing them up for a retreat. We get the old wife describes her husband's foible scene, a comedy classic, but The Simpsons push it to such a hilarious degree. Here's where being able to cut to the B-plot is helping them out. In other episodes, these complaints might become tiresome or unfair. But since this Homer is such a wreck, it's equally cathartic for the audience. I like Homer's little interjections, his shocked and dejected reactions. Some excellent animation throughout this whole sequence. But even more importantly, the War of the Simpsons keeps the social angle throughout. The heart of the conflict is in how embarrassed Marge was, so it's paramount that Homer and Marge aren't fighting it out by themselves. Act 2 gives us this scene of Homer noisily wandering into church. Once again, played more awkwardly and down to earth than something like what Ned did in Homer Loves Flanders. Then, at the marriage retreat, having Helen Lovejoy so in our face, welcoming us with her tacit judgment. And having Ned and Maud right there with them, who witnessed Marge's embarrassment firsthand. It hits on that relatable yet horrifying dynamic of trying to improve some aspect of yourself, but having to do so in front of others. Also, having the Flanders there, as well as these two, adds some extra humor and some variety from all the Homer-Marge infighting. Needless to say, these two get the best joke of the entire episode. Arguably the best joke in all of season 2. I love them so much. Even if you don't get the reference, it's still hilarious. Dan and Julie's voice acting is just phenomenal here. Glory describing Johnny Boy over here, and of course him declaring her Queen of the HARPIES and putting that crown on her. And then how Lovejoy gets them to stare at each other's eyes, and it somehow immediately works. It's so silly and ridiculous. Gosh, it's like just staring at each other isn't a magical resolution. Bart gets hit by a car? I think this episode is pretty underrated in terms of its jokes. I always forget how many great gags are scattered throughout it. It's one of those where you can definitely see the show's sense of humor evolving. I can feel the bridge between seasons 2 and 3. The dialogue is a bit snappier, willing to quickly bounce around to a new subject. They'll do an actual screw the audience joke, a quick TV gag. They're more apt to do short fantasy sequences now, like the babysitter remembering or Marge turning into a catfish. Or this fantasy, which always reminds me of the one from the legalized gambling episode. Although I think I prefer this one more because of the way it transforms into the nightmare with those stylized black outlines. Also, much like the Virginia Woolf reference, it taught my younger self something new. What is this Algonquin roundtable thing, I wondered. One of my favorite things about classic Simpsons references is how it introduces younger folks to all these random facts, inviting curious minds to learn more about them. Someday I will read The Old Man and the Sea, so I can fully enjoy this ending. Maybe that's why General Sherman remains the aspect of the story I am most on the fence about, in terms of its effectiveness. The main difficulty with this story archetype is in figuring out the proper test for the atonement character that suits their blunder. It's not enough for Homer to spend Act 3 begging for forgiveness, he has to demonstrate his change in some way. So they settle on this fishing thing. Pacing-wise, it's implemented well, introducing this new conflict point when ramping up the retreat storyline. Homer's never shown a strong interest in fishing before, but whatever. We need to think of a distraction for him. They totally nail the folkloric aspect of General Sherman. How this chatty bait shop guy sets the stage, this round table of rustic characters so excited by Homer's declaration. I grew up in the countryside when I was little, and they captured this setting perfectly. My biggest criticism with General Sherman is that he lacks the social element of Homer's overindulgence and Marge's embarrassment. Most of Marge's issues are that Homer repeatedly embarrasses her in front of her friends, and he continues to do so when he goes fishing. Granted, Homer didn't mean to abandon Marge here, they wisely made this an accident, showing at least some character growth. But the resolution doesn't fit the crime that well. At the beginning, Homer kinda sorta accidentally overindulges and embarrasses Marge. In the end, he once again accidentally indulges in fishing. However, this time, he throws his selfishness overboard to show Marge that she means everything to him. It kinda works. Like, it's not terrible, but I don't feel like Homer shows much introspection towards Marge's needs, other than making a grand gesture. I've always known Homer would do anything for Marge. What I don't know is whether he fully understands how to be a better husband to her. He's still not stopping himself from getting in these situations. That was part of her gripe. It's exacerbated by how quickly Marge accepts this. Homer gives a speech, and Marge is like, "Damn, I'm totally won over. Let's throw another doomed house party." This ending is way better than Bart gets hit by a car, because they have an actual relationship and we get a sense of Marge's pain. The characters actually talk to each other. What a concept. But they could have used another 30 seconds here to sell this better. Also, the winking fish is total garbage, and I will not feel defenses for it. I'll admit it, when Matt Groening trashed it in the DVD commentary, I totally jumped on the bandwagon. He is 100% correct. And not because of the animals not being animals thing he hates so much. This is the kind of cloying, over-indicative crap that would even make Walt Disney roll his eyes. You can't do this unironically in the 1990s, guys. Don't make me send the Addams Family after you. At the same time, while the winking fish is awful, and I'm not totally sold on the plot device, there is something about General Sherman that captivates me. Maybe I'm becoming like Homer, hanging on the word of some urban or rural legend, where you dream of being the local hero that slays the dragon. There's a reason why that man versus nature angle works in classic literature after all. That romanticism, that sense of adventurousness, how it can tie into a story about the person you love. I do feel that when watching this final act. I just wish it was attached to a conflict better suited to it. Despite those criticisms, I think I've been sleeping on the War of the Simpsons. My mind stereotypes it as the dusty old marriage crisis episode, one of like 100 in the series. But that's unfair. There is something special about this portrayal of Homer and Marge's marriage. It's brave enough to roll around in the muck, really muddy up Homer's character. Give us that naked and raw portrayal of the worst aspects of being married to him. And unlike darker, more jerk-assy affairs, they understood where the edge of the cliff is, where Homer still feels like himself and gives him something reasonable he can crawl his way back from in the next 15 minutes. Throw in a few all-time great Simpsons jokes, and you get an underappreciated little gem from season 2. Sure, it's less innovative than Bart gets hit by a car, but at least it knows what it is.